I would say it's largely pretty dark. It's definitely a COVID record.
We're venturing into maybe areas that a little bit that we haven't done before, but it's heavy. It's aggressive.
It's pretty dark. There's a lot of dark elements to this, and there's definitely a mood to it.
Not unlike most of our releases, but especially with this one, the tone of the record is very dark.
It's not the end of the world just yet, but I'm sure it's coming.
The material has been written for some time now, and when COVID sort of first started to happen, I just sat here and wrote a bunch of stuff, and it's dark. So there's some shit on there that's not cheerful.
When we were recording a few of Tim's parts while I was there, after he was done, he sat back on the couch and he goes, "Man, this album's really dark." And I'm like, "Hey, what are you going to do? You go with it."
There's times where it's just moody, and just the vibe is just sometimes just like, God, this is fucking hopelessness, and just for a couple bars here and there. And, you could always take it back to COVID, and I'm sure what everybody's been through, and just isolation. So maybe that's a good word for it. Maybe just being isolated,
It's probably being, seeing the light at the end of the tunnel with the pandemic, but the writing was a lot of, stuck in the pandemic kind of mindset of like, what the hell is going on? Like, there's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of uneasiness in the vibe of the music and the lyrical content.
It's all dependent on what the vocalist says. So, the tone for the whole thing is, not the cheeriest of stuff, but the record's badass. I mean, it really is. So, there's definitely like, there are goofy elements to it, DFD sort of stuff that you would expect. But there's also some darkness in there, I would say.
I mean, it's definitely dark. Most of this stuff that we do is darkish. It's heavy. There's a lot of drop tunings. There's a lot of minor keys. So, from in that respect, that's what I heard right off the bat. And that puts you in a kind of certain frame of mind as well.
The last couple of years, we would do things, not a lot of extreme, different tunings. We tend to play in standard, a lot of drop D. Jason likes to make up tunings.
Boys and girls, this is tuning.
This is a very large part of the guitar experience in the studio.
Tune for 47 hours, track for 5
It's him
minutes.
going, not yet. No. Not there.
Jason, we all like to write in odd time signatures too. So it makes you think. That's one of the things too I love about so many of these projects is that I'm not sitting back there playing, a 4/4 backbeat and doing caveman fills, which nothing against that. There are guys who do that very well and have made a very, very good living, in fact, doing that.
I think I wrote one song for this album. There's 9 songs on the album. And Jason, during the pandemic, and because he has 10 million riffs stored away, he just started piecing this stuff together. When he's not at work, he's just sitting at his computer, just writing. The guy's a writing machine. So he came up with some really complicated, whacked out parts for a lot of these songs that's really, if you hear the straightforward metal riffs, that's kind of my wheelhouse. And then he comes up with these passages that are like, where the hell did that come from?
We still enjoy writing and recording the kind of music that we do, and we have those stylistic changes within the records, as opposed to Todd saying, okay, we're just going to throw out everything and we're going to do a noise record, or we're going to do something along these lines. That's completely antithetical to who we are as, a group.
In cult classic, maybe the familiar elements are just classic DFD sounds. Tim is using a lot of the keyboard patches that maybe you would hear on earlier DFD albums, just that straight up kind of organ sound that Jeff Siegel used to use a lot. And it definitely sounds like a progression has taken place, but certain elements are still there, obviously, because it's us playing and performing and writing.
A lot of beautiful grand piano playing from Mr. Timmy, as we hear, in the last few albums as well.
Boop beep. I got it. I fucking hit it.
With Sweet Nothings, that was Tim's first album with us in the studio for Dog Fashion, and the keyboard and piano work that he did on that album is just absolutely unbelievable, in my opinion. And I, there's a little bit of reminiscence of that.
I think there's still like the tritones and let's see, it's kind of still the goofy stuff is in there, but there's certain tones in this where it's what's the word I'm looking for? It's very moody at times. Kind of spreads out. There's like, as some of the earlier stuff, there's kind of more zany stuff like that. There's little sparks here and there with different horn parts. But one of the days where Steve was gone for a couple hours, so I actually worked with Drew, the other guy, and he was filling in with him in a couple things, and we tried something really cool, which is fun. I think we've done it on a couple of the albums, but it's been a while since I did it, where doing a lot of reverse delay, so coming up with melodies that are completely backwards and turning them around and just placing them in different parts of the album. And it's just when everything's in reverse delay, it's very kind of moody and just kind of just undulates this way, and it sometimes will sound just like a patch, but the way that it was recorded and kind of came out was really cool.
There's one song in particular that has one of the more involved intros that we've ever done. That it literally took me sitting in the control room and scoring out and counting. It's actually a point of pride for me on the record. I wrote the part in the studio and played it with no music to a click, to not to music in my head, but music I had written for myself. It's a pretty involved intro, and Dog Fashion Disco fans will be immediately familiar with that.
There's some parts that are pretty complicated, like are going to create a nightmare trying to recreate these songs live, but it is what it is. But I don't know, maybe and it's not an overwhelmingly complicated album, but there's, like, for instance, on a song like If I Only Had a Brain, I mean, the beginning 2 minutes of the song, it's just like a roller coaster ride. It's a mind fuck. So a lot of twists and turns. And then the song settles into, like, a 4/4 verse, and then you're like, oh, okay, this is something that even the first time you hear it, you can just kind of bob your head with and dig into it.
So If I Had a Brain is one of those instances where it's a minute long intro. That's the song that is one of my, it's one take. It wasn't the first take, but it was close to the top. But it's one performance the whole way through that intro, and I'm really proud of how that turned out.
The beginning for If I Only Had a Brain, where it's just all over the place. It's a fucking mess, man. And it's kind of what it sounds like. It's just like, it sounds like just a weird dream, and what the fuck do you do to this stuff?
There's a tune called This Sow Is Mine that is more of this album's darkest days. Super catchy chorus, driving the whole way through.
If DFD had a pop song, it would be that song, but the chorus starts off with fuck. So there's no possibility of it being a pop song. It's the weirdest thing. It's super catchy though. People are gonna, that's like, our fans are gonna be like, that's an anthem for DFD fans for sure. I draw maybe a parallel between that song and Darkest Days, stylistically.
I think the best bass tone that I always hope to get, that I compare to for Dog Fashion, is probably on Ad Nauseum. The tones that he got for the stuff that we did on that record was, in my opinion, the best that has sounded on a Dog Fashion album. And, I think that we definitely captured some of those fields of tones. And I always tell people with this new album, it is reminiscent of other albums. I would say, I've been telling people, like, if you're a fan of Adultery, if you're a fan of Sweet Nothings, Ad Nauseum, and some of the, even the older stuff, but, it's more of like, this lineup. If you like what you've heard in the last three albums, the three original albums, then you're really going to like this one.
Fans will immediately recognize it being a Dog Fashion Disco record. There's definitely a maturation, I think, in the performances, but the music itself almost like harkens back to the really aggressive stuff when we were doing in our late teens and early 20s.
It's twisted. It's got some parts where I think if a couple of fans are in the room listening to it to each other, they'll turn and smile and go, "Okay, that's the DFD we know and love." So I think we mission accomplished.
And I'm doing a bunch of stuff, licking my balls and butt.